オラオラ
A small Japanese company was built with the purpose of dominating the arcade industry, and for the better half of its life, that's exactly what it did. Although it found success early on, it would eventually all come crashing down, from dominating the arcades to going bankrupt. This is the story behind one of the most iconic video game companies of all time. This is the story of SNK. It was early 1973. Japanese businessman Akichi Kawasaki sparks an idea. He notices how popular coin-operated video games have become in Japan, and he thinks this might be a golden opportunity. This idea would soon give birth to a little company known as Shin Nihon Kikaku, or better known as SNK. Founded in 1973, but not physically established until 1978 as a joint stock company, SNK, short for Shin Nihon Kikaku, or New Japan Project in English, would become one of the major video game hardware and software developers through the early 80s and throughout the 90s. The first two titles that SNK released were Ozma Wars in 1979 and Safari Rally in 1980. Though these games were not groundbreaking, it was a start, and soon game quality would drastically improve. Most notably with Vanguard, released in 1981. In April 1986, still known as Shin Nihon Kikaku Corporation, would officially change its name to what it is known as today, SNK. At this point, the operations of SNK shifted their focus solely towards developing and licensing video games for arcade use and later for early consoles. Between 1979 and 1986, SNK produced 23 standalone arcade games. Some of the more notable releases from this time period include Alpha Mission in 1985 and Athena in 1986. Athena would gain a large following when it was ported to the Nintendo Entertainment Center in 1987. SNK's most successful game from this time would have to be Ikari Warriors. Released in 1986, it was so popular that it was licensed and ported to at least 8 different consoles. At the time, Japan was affected by the video game crash of 1983. The console manufacturer Nintendo remained in business throughout and after the crash, so SNK became a third-party licensee for Nintendo's Famicom, or the Nintendo Entertainment System known in North America. In response to strong sales of the company's NES ports, SNK began to dabble in the development of original software designs, specifically for the NES console. Two fairly well-known games came out of this: Baseball Stars, released in 1989, and Crystallis, about a year later. In 1989, 2 home video game consoles were released in North America, the Sega Genesis and the NEC Hudson Soft's TurboGrafx 16. Nintendo followed suit with a new system in 1991, the Super Nintendo. During this time, SNK created the idea of a modular cabinet for arcades. Up to that point, arcade cabinets typically contained only one game. When an operator wanted to switch or replace that game, it would have to completely remove the internals of the existing cabinet or exchange the entire setup for another game. SNK's new system, called the Neo Geo MVS, short for Multi-Video System, featured multiple games in a single cabinet and used a cartridge-based system. The system debuted in 1990 and could contain up to 6 separate games in a single cabinet. To switch in a new game, all the operator had to do was remove one cartridge and exchange it for another. The MVS was an immediate success. It greatly shortened the setup time needed for each game, minimized floor space for cabinets, and reduced the cost of new cartridges. The first Neo Geo Land arcade opened in Tokyo in 1992, and they quickly became popular for their large selection of Neo Geo games. The chain continued to expand throughout the 1990s, with locations opening in other Japanese cities such as Osaka and Yokohama. However, as home gaming consoles became more popular, arcades began to decline in popularity, and many Neo Geo LAN locations closed. SNK wanted to bring arcade games to people's homes without making performance compromises that typically home consoles were forced to make. So in 1990, SNK released the Neo Geo line of home arcade consoles, known as the Neo Geo Advanced Entertainment System, also known as the Neo Geo AES. Initially, the AES was only available for rent or for use in hotel settings. But SNK quickly began selling the system through stores when customers' response indicated that people were willing to spend money on home versions. Some notable games that come out of this would be the King of Fighters series, Metal Slug, and Fatal Fury. Compared to other consoles at the time, the Neo Geo AES had way better graphics and sound, but a steep price tag, $599, or roughly about $1,300 in modern time. Sold with 2 controllers in a game, either Baseball Stars Professional or NAM 1975. SNK would then go on to produce the Neo Geo CD console, the Hyper Neo Geo 64 arcade system, and 2 handheld consoles, the Neo Geo Pocket and Pocket Color. The Neo Geo Pocket Color was SNK's original handheld system. It was released in Japan in late 1998, but because its sales were so low, it was discontinued in 1999 in favor of the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which was later released in North America and Europe in 2001. Sadly, by the late 1990s, the tide was shifting and the once dominant company started to reveal its cracks. Once the 2D fighting game craze of the early 90s had started to die down, it would hit SNK the hardest, seeing as it had been behind much of SNK's success. Both the Neo Geo CD and the Hyper Neo Geo 64 failed to meet sales expectations. At the same time, the Neo Geo Pocket, while initially selling well, began to fall behind in the market after the release of the Game Boy Color. In January of 2000, SNK's poor financial status led to its acquisition by Aruze, a company known for its pachinko machines. SNK would see little success in the video game market at this point. The crossover titles Capcom vs SNK games were a success. However, most of the profits went to Capcom because it developed and published the games. SNK would release SNK vs Capcom Match in the Millennium. However, the game never really sold as well as expected. SNK would end up cutting ties with its American partnership on June 13, 2000, and on October 30, 2001, SNK would officially go bankrupt. SNK's intellectual property would then be purchased by Playmore, a company founded by none other than the original founder of SNK, Akichi Kawasaki. From 2006 to 2012, SNK started to go after a different type of market, with its release of a Japanese slot machine. The company released its first 2 machines that year, Metal Slug and Dragon Gal. During this time, Playmore would see itself in a bunch of legal issues regarding its intellectual property, eventually having to sue and ultimately winning the case against the company it had originally purchased the assets from. In December of 2012, SNKPlaymore released the Neo Geo X, a relaunched mobile Neo Geo console. On October 2nd, 2013, Playmore would terminate its licensing agreement with the console's manufacturer Tomo, ending production of the Neo Geo X less than a year after its release. However, one notable release from SNKPlaymore around this time would be the King of Fighters 13. This game would be considered by many to be the best game released by the company. In 2016, SNK dropped the Playmore name from its logo and reintroduced its old slogan, "The future is now," officially changing its corporate name back to SNK. On July 2018, SNK released the Neo Geo Mini, a miniature console based on the design of the company's Japanese arcade machines. It was preloaded with 40 classic Neo Geo games. Though the idea was neat, it really was a niche product and didn't really sell that great. In June of 2019, the 12th entry in the Samurai Showdown series was released for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, followed by an arcade version in October and a Nintendo Switch version later in that year. Nintendo announced on September 4th, 2019 that Terry Bogard, the protagonist from the Fatal Fury series, would be added as a downloadable character to the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate game. In November 2020, the MISC Foundation, a non-profit organization belonging to the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, purchased a 33.3% interest in the SNK company. He did so with the intention of purchasing another 17.7% of the shares down the road in order to take full control of the company. And currently, this is where we sit with the company SNK. For me, it's kind of a weird situation. To see such an iconic video game company that so many of us gamers have grown to adore throughout the years just basically be sold off to the highest bidders. And all we can do as fans is sit, watch, and wait.